O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
Hey, everybody. It's episode 98 of the Hunting Collective. Thanks for joining us this week. Phil and I are in Bozeman, Montana. I am back and better than ever. Best year ever. Hunting Collective. My son was born 4 days ago. Asher August O'Brien. So I'm back in the saddle, man. I'm inspired. You'll hear that soon. Before we get into that, there's a lot going on in this episode. We got James Swan, PhD. We're going to talk to him about a lot of things. We talk about his acting career, his book, Hunting is a Sacred Art, his book, The Defense of Hunting, his documentaries, his book, A War in the Woods, that he wrote with John Norris about their time together fighting the cartel on America's public lands and their marijuana grows. So this guy's done a lot. He's one of the more interesting guys. Kind of reminds me of a more theatrical, maybe Valerius Geist or something like that. I mean, he's done a ton in the media realm within hunting. So you're going to enjoy James Swan coming up. We also have Miles Nolte and Joe Farinato's back to talk about the two teenagers that were charged with animal cruelty in PA. We talk about a lot in this. We talk about lab-based meats.
It's a long intro, but
it's not really an intro.
No, it's not.
It's like a whole podcast.
The first half of the episode.
It's a full podcast.
Yeah.
We did a full podcast, then another full podcast.
Stuffed with content.
Stuffed with content. So we got a lot there for you. We just got a lot built up after all this time. And so we're going to talk to you about a lot of things. Also, a guy killed a coyote in New Hampshire with his bare hands.
Mm-hmm. He may or may not be a Bond villain.
Yeah, my commentary angers Phil. Phil gets angry.
I do.
He's still angry. You just look at his eyes, got this certain anger in his eyes. But before all of that comes to you, you want to go to New Zealand. You want to hunt tar. You want to do it maybe with me. Maybe you don't want to do it with me, but you would probably take it anyway.
but you have no choice.
Yeah, I really have no choice. You'd have to pay for it otherwise. This one is free. First Light. Go to firstlight.com, go to their homepage, scroll down. You'll find the Win a Hunt in New Zealand with Ben O'Brien from the Hunting Collective. We're going to go with Southern Lake Safaris, our friends over there on the South Island of New Zealand. And if you win this hunt, you're going to get a prize package, a full First Light kit, a Weatherby Mark V Weathermark LT, and a Benchmade Altitude knife, among probably other things. And I haven't told First Light this, but I'm doing it anyway. If you win, and you're well-spoken, which I'm sure you will be, we're going to have you on the podcast. We're going to start talking about your experience, how you're getting ready. We're going to have to get in shape, Phil. This is a rough hunt. I've done it a couple times. It's up and down. A lot of elevation gain. A lot of long shots. We're going to have to practice with our riffles. We're going to get sighted in with our Weatherby rifles and be ready to go take on New Zealand. It's a great hunt. It's one of my favorite hunts that I've done around the world. I'm excited to do it again this May with one of you. So if you go to firstlight.com and enter, you'll have a chance to do all that with me. I'm very much looking forward to it. As I said last time, I'm honored. Last time I gave out a link that I don't think worked. So just go to the website, firstlight.com, and scroll down. You'll find it. It's a picture of a guy looking like he's in New Zealand.
It's right there.
And it says, win a tar hunt.
Yeah, I was looking at that. I was like, oh, is that a picture of you?
No.
No, it's not.
No.
No.
That guy's looking.
Just a guy having a great time in New Zealand.
That guy's looking at me maybe across the way.
Oh, that's good.
Maybe I'm lost.
Yeah, he's trying to help you out, which should give the listeners a lot of confidence in hunting with you.
Yeah. I'm not saying we're not going to get lost.
O'Brien?
Well, I'm pretty talkative. That's about the only thing I really bring to it. Amateur hunter. Ben O'Brien. All right. Well, we got a long one. This one is packed full of stuff. It goes all over the place, but I think it's a good one. So strap in for episode 98. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 98. Is it 98?
98.
Joe was saying that I never remember the number.
You don't.
Or people's names. I mispronounce their names.
You do, but that's okay.
This is a very self-aware podcast, Miles. We're self-aware. We know what our faults are.
Listen, everybody makes mistakes.
We all have flaws.
You must own them.
Must own them. So this is episode 98. We're pretty sure. And I'm back.
Are we 98% sure?
Yeah.
Oh,
You're welcome.
Cut that. Well, I'm back, and I have a child, or a second child. We did it. Thank you for all the support out there in listener land. I am off social media. I did delete Instagram from my phone. But I'm not going to lie. I went on the website one time to check, see what was going on.
To make sure the world hadn't ended?
Yeah.
You didn't know about it?
I didn't know. Instagram. So you may have seen that I've been on there. But I'm supposed to be in a blackout period to spend more time with my family and you guys.
Yeah.
So...
No, don't spend
winning.
it with us.
All right.
That's a terrible idea. Just the family.
Well, everybody in here is fathers. We got Joe Farinado. You're the only non-father. Miles Nolte is a father.
Yep.
Phil Taylor,
Father.
That's what they tell me.
Phil Taylor, father.
By they, do you mean
said
the
it.
children?
They have to remind me.
They're like, you're my dad.
Do I know you?
that's me.
Does anybody? I felt when you have the kid, right? I'm a very reflective individual. I think a lot about things, as you guys may know, listening. And so when the kid came, I was just really struck. I was like the beauty of life, and I was just reflecting on what life means and life and death, and looking at this little baby. Baby opens his eyes. I look at the baby. We have a moment, and I start feeling super emotional. And I started writing in my computer. I wrote like 5,000 words about life. And I felt like, do other people do that? Phil, did you feel that emotional and reflective at the time of the birth of your children?
I did, but apparently not enough, because I didn't write a manifesto about how incredibly precious our experience is on this planet.
Heartless.
I definitely did
Did
a
you
fair
too?
amount of writing.
Did you too?
In the hospital, for sure. I wrote one. I remember writing one complete essay that was sort of like, it seemed to make sense in my sleep-deprived brain. I should go back and see if it makes any sense. But, I'll be honest, what I do, and I started doing this as soon as Amy knew she was pregnant, I've been writing letters to my kid in the future.
Me too.
And I have like a whole store of letters to him that like are really more about my experience. Like, I don't really care. He won't get any of it anyway. No. But it's more like my journal of fatherhood, but having him as sort of the muse for it.
Yeah. And, if looking back, if he's able to read that when he becomes a father one day, if that is to happen, there'll be some value in there.
Maybe he'll hate me by
But
then
it's
and
more-
be like, I don't want to listen to your shit,
You
Dad.
bastard! I burned this book.
It's very possible.
Yeah, that's true. I did the same thing. I got a little leather journal when I was traveling a lot and going on hunts all over the place. And I would just write in it at night.
Yeah.
Being laying a tent or whatever, write in it. I still do that now. I think it's important. And if you're not going to be, Joe, you'll experience this one day. So you're getting married soon, Joe.
Yep.
So kids, does Calvin want to have kids?
She does.
She does. So
Three of
soon
them.
enough.
She
Three
wants-
of them.
She wants 3.
She has an exact number.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no.
Wait till you get through
She-
two of them.
called
You
for
don't
3.
want to be outnumbered.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you that right now.
That's what I said.
Yep.
That's what I said.
Tell her I said
I said it scares me.
Unless you're going to get, another husband or wife in the mix, which, no judgment. But
What?
I would suggest stopping
I
it
have
too.
some judgment.
No, I just didn't see it going that way.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I just didn't see that. I didn't see that going that way, but that's fine. I'm not judging anybody for their choices. You got to move to Utah, but
As long as
not far
everybody
away.
is a willing participant in the situation, I'm
into
fine with it.
I'm into it as long as you're all happy. So anyway, that's when that happens to you, I think that's the appropriate time to be inspired about life, to reflect on life, and to have those
I'd agree.
emotions. I think that's appropriate. But I think I maybe took it a little bit overboard.
I also think that level of exhaustion, for me anyway, puts me in a space where I'm hyper nostalgic.
Yeah.
And everything feels really important, right? And I think that the thoughts that I'm having are monumental. And writing them down just really poses an opportunity for future me to look back and go, what in God's name were you talking about?
Those first 3 months are just
it's
are
like
kind of like a hallucinatory haze.
Yeah,
I feel like you're floating the whole time.
People say
for many reasons.
People say you should take DMT. I'm like, I'm on it right now. I'm not on it, but I'm on it. Like I'm feeling the way.
I just hold on. Pause. Who's contacting you going, you know what you should do? Take DMT. Like no one has ever reached out to me.
For sure there has been. For sure. There's a guy who might listen to this. I can't remember his name. I think it's Mansell. He's doing a psychedelics and hunting documentary. So he's often invited me to go on ayahuasca vision journeys throughout Central America. And so people, that might happen. Maybe I'll do that one day. But
it's a recurring theme on your podcast, ayahuasca and DMT. So I feel like it has to happen.
I'm interested in it.
Yeah.
But I feel
you bring it up a lot.
I have a similar. I imagine what I'm feeling now is very similar to DMT.
I've never done DMT, so I can't.
Last night I got about 2 hours of sleep in 20-minute increments, and so Miles knows what that's like. Phil,
yes.
Can you hear it in my voice?
I can. Honestly, I can hear it in your voice a little bit, but you don't. No, you look great.
You're pretty well put together.
You don't look like a new dad. And take that as a compliment.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, well, let's get to the show. Thanks, everybody, for the well wishes. It seriously is helpful and means a lot in these times. As I sit here and reflect on everything I've got and how lucky I am. And again, let's just thank a nurse, specifically nurses in this case, but also doctors. I was very struck by, I won't go through the whole story. They're doing a C-section on my wife while talking about their favorite shows on TV. And I thought, I was standing there having an emotional breakdown. My wife is and the doctor's like, we've done this 4 times today. And it that alone put me in the mindset of what they do is amazing, but that's their everyday life. They go and do amazing work, a lot of times life-saving work, definitely life-giving work every single day, multiple times a day. And I podcast. I told every nurse that came in, I'm like, I don't know how you do what you do. I have a podcast. And one of them said, podcasts are hard.
No,
they're not. No, they're not.
No one's going to die.
Don't say that.
I promise.
There's nothing. But I was interested in their Netflix commentary during the C-section.
Oh, yeah.
They're all into that documentary, Don't Fuck with Cats, which we're going to talk about in a second, Joe. Actually, that's a good transition to what we're going to talk about next. And that is, you'll find out. Last week, Miles, you weren't here, but last week we talked about the 2 teenagers in Pennsylvania who are being charged with animal cruelty, among other things, based on a video they posted on Snapchat. Now, we got a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of reaction to our conversation. A couple people called me out for not getting it, and I think that was because everybody in the room felt, Anthony Licata, Phil, and Joe felt that harsh punishments were necessary. I feel like that too. I was just a little bit worried, and still am worried about the vitriol on social media. Because it gets to be hyperbolic, it gets to be very intense. People are calling these teenagers monsters, which they very well may be monsters. But it just worries me that language gets thrown around all too commonly within this stuff. People are rushing to demonize these folks. And as we found out, Joe, from doing a little research, there's not a whole lot of redeeming qualities in these 2 young men.
No, there was a lot more to the videos than what a lot of the general public saw.
Yeah. So I got an email. I got, like I said, a couple of messages. People are saying that I didn't get it. That I didn't want to just string these kids up in the town square, and I didn't want to run out the normal anger, outrage on social media and use all that language that everybody likes to use, calling them monsters, saying they should get the maximum punishment. The court of public opinion and outrage was pretty clear on this one. They kind of have some good evidence to go on that, but it worries me. So, I got a email from someone who wishes to remain anonymous, and he said that he signed the petition we talked about, and that he regretted it. Among other things, he said the maximum punishment, which was, 37 years, Joe?
Yeah, add them all up, 37 years for the 18-year-old.
Yeah, he said that now seems pretty extreme to him. But he was one of those emailers that just felt they needed to be punished, but that 37 years, the maximum penalty. Now, we're not saying that they're going to get the maximum penalty.
Yeah, very rare.
It's very rare that someone would do that. That judging these kids that harshly this quickly could be a mistake. Let's let the judicial system do its work. So that's some of the reaction that we had. I take this very seriously. I'm not being flippant about what I say about the internet reaction. Joe, you can tell us what you found out, but first tell us what the official you talked to. Who was it again?
Travis Lau.
What's Travis do?
Pennsylvania Game Commission. He's their media contact.
Got it.
So
we reached out to Travis, or Joe did.
Yep.
And Joe, you found out a little bit about how internet outrage and folks sending in stuff to the Game Commission fueled the investigation.
Yeah, that really brought it to the Game Commission's attention. Like, without the outrage on social media and everything, they probably wouldn't have known about it, but that was the driving factor. It's like people were posting to their Facebook page and really pushing for the Game Commission to investigate it, so of course they took it upon themselves to do so. The Game Commission did, although they conducted a really thorough investigation. Lots of people were getting really mad at them that they didn't just come out with charges and go charge these kids.
Yeah.
But Travis explained to me that it was really important that they went through their investigation, which I think took about 7 weeks. They did thorough investigations, making sure that these kids were in Pennsylvania, went out there, went to their stands, took their phones, went through their phones, saw all the videos.
Took phones of their friends.
Took phones from friends.
Anyone who got texted the video.
Yep.
That they were at least willing to get from the two kids. One of them, Joe got the affidavit.
Yep.
That detailed the interviews of both the minor, the 17-year-old, and the 18-year-old.
Yep.
I read them. There's a lot there. They seem not to really understand still when they're being interviewed by the Game Commission. The severity of it.
Yeah.
The way it describes their reaction is they're kind of excusing it. I mean, I've never seen someone put the evidence out there in the public and then try to explain it away like a 17-year-old would if they got caught breaking, pissed up smoking weed by their mom or something. That's the way that it looks there. So it's clear reading those affidavits and having the recounting of the initial interviews with both the individuals that they don't get it. I think it's safe to say from what's there, that's what I gleaned at least.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot that went on there. It seemed like they didn't get it. I mean, they obviously weren't in the field prepared.
Yeah.
And supposedly they were just trying to dispatch the animal because they were out of ammo and didn't have a knife.
This is the excuse that they're using. In the video, they're laughing while kicking it in the face.
Yeah. And
they did this. The details,
it's disturbing to talk about.
The details that we have here do no favors to these two teenagers.
Yeah,
no favors. Makes them look so much worse than even the actual video does, because it doesn't cover contrition, but it doesn't seem like there was much.
Yeah. Well, Travis informed me too that deer got up and ran away after the whole ordeal.
Yeah, they never found the deer.
No, they never found it.
What was the firearm he shot it with?
The
17-year-old minor shot it with. Wasn't it?
I can't remember.
It says the caliber. I know that. But
450 caliber, Savage Bushmaster.
Yeah, so he's shooting with an AR-15.
Yeah,
modern sporting rifle. So he does that, and then he drops. He has 3 rounds.
3 rounds. Shoots it once, wounds it.
And he drops.
Ejects a live round.
Yeah, live cartridge onto the ground out of the tree stand.
And then misses with that 3rd cartridge that he had, and he only had 3 cartridges with him.
No knife.
No knife.
And so then their version of the story goes that then they were going to dispatch the deer by
crushing its windpipe.
Yep. Which somehow includes kicking it in the face and laughing.
No.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just telling you, like, once you get into this stuff, the details here, and read the affidavit, if you were pissed before, good luck, because it's sick.
Yeah, well, and one of the main pieces of evidence for the aggravated cruelty to an animal, one of the felony charges, you have to have physical evidence that the animal sustained serious bodily injury. And the bit of evidence that the Game Commission has from that is the antler from the deer, with a chunk of skull plate.
Yeah.
From the deer, yeah. The deer got away after they... That takes a substantial amount of force.
Yeah.
Substantial. And that's... I don't know why you would be kicking a deer in the face and messing with its antlers if you're trying to dispatch it.
Yeah. Miles, have you seen this video?
I have intentionally not seen this video.
Yeah.
You really don't want to.
I don't, and I'm fully aware that I don't want to see this video, and I still don't. I'm obviously aware of the situation because we're covering it, and I think my initial response is similar to yours, Ben, in that find me a teenager who hasn't done monstrous things, and I will show you a liar. Yeah. But I also think that there has to be a level of accountability for the horrible things we do as teenagers that allow us to grow into more mature adults. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that 37 years in prison is going to facilitate that shift for either one of these young men.
I'm on board with that. That's absurd.
But having said that, something needs to happen in order to engender a recognition of how awful and wrong this is and why.
And it seems like something, beyond the torching on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Beyond that, the book is being thrown at them, and there's, I know Travis was talking to you about there's more to the video than what was on social media or what we've seen. Not that there needs to be any more to it. That doesn't really matter. Where this comes into the documentary on Netflix called "Don't Fuck with Cats." Anybody seen this thing?
You're really?
It's real. No, that's the title of it.
I was going to watch it this weekend because
I know the premise. I haven't seen it though.
So here's
is this when the cats eat people?
No, that would be a good documentary.
Okay, I'll get to that later. Continue.
That's Batman.
No, there's a new study out. Go on. Yeah.
Okay. We got to get to that.
Yeah.
I got a lot of stuff to get to. So after thinking about this, one of the things I thought about is it's often, I mean, if you read the 9 signs of a serial killer, animal abuse is normally 1, 2, 3. It's in the top indicators of someone that's going to be a serial killer. I thought about that after we recorded. So, though there is the danger to society aspect of punishing these people that are doing this, I think this falls under that kind of material, like that kind of evidence that someone is sick and has an issue and is disassociated in a lot of ways. Sociopathic tendencies are there too. So I started thinking about that. I just stumbled on this documentary. I don't even think documentary is a good word for it, but whatever. It's about a man who posted online anonymous videos of him killing cats. The first one is 2 kittens in a vacuum seal bag. The second one was drowning a kitten in a bathtub. The third one, I can't remember the exact abuse, but it doesn't matter. Oh, there was a large snake and a kitten. Ugh. So there was a bunch of internet researchers, we'll call them, internet detectives, who got a hold of this stuff. They started a Facebook page. They all got together. They started doing their own research on who this person was, trying to catch him. The person was maniacal enough to kind of leave breadcrumbs for these folks. He understood the game. It becomes very much a mystery thriller at some point. But then it takes a huge turn because the 4th or 5th video this person uploads is him murdering someone.
Jesus.
Stabbing someone to death. And then the whole thing turns, right? So as I'm watching this, I'm thinking of these kids. Apples to apples, maybe not. But they cover it in the documentary. The story really is that the reason it's titled "Don't Fuck with Cats" because that's one of the rules of the internet. But in rules in general, it's a sign of that sadistic behavior is a sign of things to come. This is just one of those cases where it made for I don't know, riveting is a good word, but it made for an interesting documentary about the whole case. They eventually, I won't give it away, but that's the general premise. So as I'm watching that, I'm thinking of this, and those two things are tied in because if someone's willing to do this, willing to laugh while they're abusing an animal, a wild animal like that, any animal, there's something there. So it's worth watching. And I think that's what, when we talked last time about the federal legislation that Donald Trump signed back in November, it addresses that specifically as a reason why there's federal legislation to punish people who upload animal cruelty videos on the internet now. which you can correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, that is not included in the charges against these two individuals.
It's not
from
included. The charges are coming directly from Title 18 from Pennsylvania statutes.
So state.
So it's not federal.
It's all state stuff.
From my understanding, which I'm not sure if it is correct, but a federal agent would have to bring the charges forward.
It's possible. It certainly fits. It certainly fits.
Yeah.
It certainly fits.
I think something that's unsaid so far, maybe you guys covered this last time, I'm not sure, but this is particularly problematic. This is the number one reason why this is problematic is because it's just awful to see for me human beings intentionally harming and getting joy from harming an animal. But we've also got a problem here of how this reflects on the broader hunting community.
Oh, yeah.
We, with the exception of Phil, I mean, Phil's a little bit of an animal killer, I think, but not really. Not really something that he has explored to its fullest extent. The three of us have killed things, a decent number of things, right? And I think from an outside perspective, it is easier than we would like to admit for someone who's a non-hunter and doesn't have any connection to hunting culture to say, well, how are you guys any different?
Yeah.
You love to kill deer. And we have to continually fight to draw a line of nuance where, no, I don't speak for all hunters, but I will say I don't love to kill deer. I really love to hunt deer, and I really love to eat deer. The killing part is inherent in that whole process, and it doesn't, for me personally, bring me a lot of joy. I get joy upon being successful, but the actual death part doesn't tickle any happy emotions for me.
I've been thinking about this. This was another thing. We did talk about this in general last time, but I think about it a lot. I think about there's like there's an inevitability around regret in terms of like how many things I've killed.
Yeah.
And people might say, "Oh, I'm a proud hunter. I'll continue to be for my entire life, I'm sure." But if anybody listens to the first volume of the best of, we had Wyman Menzer on. He's an older gentleman who did a lot of trapping in the 70s and 80s, trapped hundreds of coyotes and fur bearers, sold their pelts to pay for his college loans and his pickup and pay for his food. So he has, very literally a lot of blood on his hands. He talked about, I asked him flat out, do you ever regret any of that? Do you ever have any moments of regret? And he said, absolutely. During that time in his life when he was killing a lot for personal gain, personal profit, right? He talks about having a coyote in a trap and seeing this coyote give up and know it was coming, know his life was up. And then he talks about going back to his truck and crying. And then, similar story, another coyote who knew his time was up and did nothing but fight and was in this trap snarling and took a picture of it, which he still has, and he's shown me. And he talked, just reflecting on that, there's regret. He has regret. And then there was doubt in the moment, right? So there should be, one of the beautiful things about hunting is it pushes that into the fore of your mind. You got to think about the inevitability of death, what it means to inflict death on some other being. That's one of the things I think helps me, one, know that there is going to be regret at some point in my life. But boy, I'm pretty sure I'll look back on some of the things I've done. I could do it now. And any hunter or angler really should be honest with themselves and be like, there's some stuff I regret.
Oh, absolutely.
There's some stuff I regret.
This was a very rough late season for me because this is the first time in my whole hunting career that I wounded an animal and didn't recover it.
Yeah.
It's never happened to me before. And I think there is some level of disassociation that we all have to undergo to be able to do what we do, right? And so we're drawing lines in the sand between what is acceptable disassociation and what isn't, right? But I would be lying. I wouldn't be sleeping at night if I were constantly thinking about, I wounded that deer. I'm sure it died. I did everything that I personally think I could have done to recover it, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is I was unable to do so.
Yeah.
And
that's what last time we had James Tantillo on, Dr. James Tantillo, and he talked about the tragic knowledge, right? Tragic wisdom, which is the philosophy that hunting thrusts upon you, this life and death scenario often. And it allows you to, if you're willing to, in this case, like you said, you can disassociate from it and act like it's a normal activity, or you can associate with it and let it teach you something. Because as he said, and others have written, that deer you kill is not so different than you.
Yep.
That life you've taken is not so different than your own life. And that's a powerful thing that you can accept and let inform the way you go through hunting. Like, I don't know a lot of people are doing that because it's a hard thing to do. Maybe it's, and we talked about I said this about having a kid, there's reflective people and unreflective people. That's okay. Like, but if you're going to reflect on it, that's a pretty powerful thing to sit and think about. And for me, it's why hunting is compelling and why I think it makes me a better person in a lot of ways. And so there is the general thought. These teenagers haven't gotten that. I didn't have that when I was 17 or 18. Yep. I can tell you that. And so it's a complicated one. Now, when it comes to what's happening from a legal standpoint, these kids are screwed. They very well should be screwed. I mean, the extra investigating we did, Joe did a lot of it, just put them, even more intensely in the crosshairs of they deserve to be punished and punished harshly. Because the affidavit is pretty damning. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is damning. There's no part of it that isn't.
So, it's hard. I would say, like, to me, the best case scenario of this is that folks on the internet were able to alert the Game Commission, alert authorities, make sure they understood this is very serious. We want it taken seriously. And they did. They did it, from all accounts, a great investigation.
Yeah,
a thorough investigation. They listened to folks that were trying to alert them to what happened. They didn't seem like they were listening to the vitriol. They didn't seem like they were allowing that outrage to drive them, which I think is where I get off the bus. Like, put the evidence in their hands and let them do their jobs.
Yep.
If these kids both got a slap on the wrist, then you can drive the outrage where it's intended to the authorities. But in this case, it looks like they're going to get some harsh penalties.
Yeah, definitely. More so for the 18-year-old than the 17-year-old, but
which is silly.
That's a hard part.
That's another can of worms we don't need to dive into.
Yeah. So I feel like that's all we're really gonna say on that. I mean, it, like we said last week, it does go in a lot of directions. That this conversation leads to a lot of things. Miles brings up a great point about people that don't agree with hunting can look at this and see something sinister that they feel is going on in our heads anyway. Mm-hmm. They might feel like this is just a manifestation of what we all are thinking. That's not true, but there it is. That's the internet. That's how it goes. So we can't really fight that. So, continue writing in with your thoughts about this. I appreciate those that wrote in for or against my standpoint. It seemed like that what I said got some people fired up. That's fine. That's what this is all about. But again, we'll have something on the media.com soon just to kind of go through this whole thing and give people as many details as we can. And I don't think we'll have any opinions in that piece. Just going to be facts as we see it. Just a nice linear accounting of how this happened. Because again, go watch that documentary. Don't fuck with cats. Don't know how. Watching that, I'm like, it's kind of like work. I have to do some investigating. But it's funny how these things come up. It's an entertaining documentary, but it goes to what we're talking about here. So do it, Joe.
I'll go watch it.
All right. Joe,
as long as Miles does.
Miles will watch it too.
All my spare time going straight to Netflix.
Dude, it's a 4-part documentary, and I was like flipping through them quick because I wasn't sleeping. Joe,
Ben,
a man in New Hampshire strangled a coyote to death.
He did,
and you reported
Ian
on
O'Reilly.
This. You reported on
he
this.
Did that.
There's a lot. This is another one where it's not just you could just write the news story, but there's some other stuff in here that reading your article that I discovered that I thought was pretty crazy. Namely, that this man was out on a hike. Is that correct, Joe?
Yep, on a little hike.
Little hike with his family.
Yep.
Wife. How many kids?
I believe 3.
3 kids.
I think you said 3.
Outnumbered.
Outnumbered.
Don't be outnumbered, Joe.
And that's when the rabid coyotes get you.
That's just exactly. Saying. They're picking off it's Darwin. Thanks, Charles. Son of a...
Wow, sorry about that.
Anyhow. Tell us the story, Joe. Or at least get us started.
So Ian O'Reilly, out hiking with his family.
Yep.
And a coyote, believed to be rabid, hasn't been tested yet, hasn't come back positive from the testing yet, attacked his young son, grabbed him by his snow jacket and pulled him to the ground. Mom was able to separate the two, and Dad put him in between and was victim of some aggressive attacks from that coyote.
Multiple. He was bitten
in the chest and in the arm. Yep. And then he put him to the ground, shoved him in the snow, and he was able to strangle him. Put his knee up on his rib cage and stuff, and hand around his windpipe and strangle him. It took about 10 minutes.
That's some intimate violence right there.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if the video of the guy, he looks like he might be in the mafia or something. He looks.
You think so?
I don't know. He's from New Hampshire.
He seemed like
They don't really have that
regular
there.
suburban dad.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. Look at the video. Pull the video
He seemed like a nice guy.
Nah, he looked like he might have done some violence in his life. Look at him. He's got like slick back hair. Either way, he's a badass.
He is.
Phil, what are you doing at this? You have 2 young children. You choking that coyote out?
Okay, in this picture on CNN, yes, he does look mafia. Yeah,
Look at
100%.
that. Look at that. He looks like a James Bond villain.
Oh, he does. Very handsome.
Handsome, yeah. Like a stubble, kind of like a... He looks like if Ryan Reynolds was a bad guy. There he is. Look at him.
Kind of looks like Liam Neeson.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Good, yeah.
That guy has
Good
some
call.
experience with fighting animals in the snow.
Yes,
Look at
he
his,
does.
he's showing his hands like he's like, these are registered. They're registered in the state of New Hampshire.
No, he definitely has that, like, what's the movie series where Liam Neeson is avenging his daughter?
Taken.
Taken. There's a Taken thing going on here.
Yeah.
I will find you.
That coyote was very much interested in living.
he talks like a mafia guy.
Does he?
You missed the second part of that quote. He said, "But so were we."
That guy has his hands are registered, baby. He is a badass. Good for you, Ian O'Reilly. You look like maybe you were like on the set of 24, and you're.
Listen, Ben, I'm mildly offended that you asked me if I would defend my small children if they were attacked by wild.
Hey, Phil!
Phil, what do you do in this situation?
I'm assuming you get taken out quick. Like.
Here, take the kid. Don't touch me.
You're just like,
Well, Ian
Here's the
O'Reilly
neck.
even sent his family away. Like while he was dealing with the coyote, he was like, "Get out of here, save yourselves."
Ian O'Reilly, he knew what to do. Time slowed down for Ian. I'm just saying, would time slow down for you? Or would you freak
It's
out?
hard to say unless I were in that situation, but I
Do you
would
feel
try
like your
my best.
fatherly instinct is strong enough?
I would hope so, yeah.
Okay.
I feel confident.
Just
Okay.
asking.
You offended him, Ben.
Are you
Wow.
mad?
I'm a little mad.
I can see why I'd be a little
Use
mad.
that anger if your son gets attacked by a coyote.
I will.
You're like, I'll show
Remember
Ben.
your
I'll show
face
Ben.
and your dumb beard and your
While I'm strangling that coyote, I'm
Yeah,
gonna fix you, Brian.
Remember this moment. Use this as fuel.
Got it. Wow.
It's a motivational talk. I would beat the shit out of that coyote. This dude, Ian O'Reilly, the bad guy from 24, he punts this thing in the face. He kicks it in its face.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. Then it comes back at him. He grabs it by the snout. And Joe, I'm just looking at you, Joe, so I'm not telling the
Yeah, no,
details
you're
are off
right.
here.
You're good.
Grabs it by the snout, pushes its face in the snow, and then puts his other hand on its windpipe and proceeds to choke it to death.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
And here's a detail. His other kid, did I already say this? His other kid was attacked by a rabid raccoon
Last year.
In
In their yard.
Get out of New Hampshire.
Yeah, get out of there, man.
They know
Moral of that
what it
story.
is to deal with rabies.
But he didn't kill the raccoon with his bare hands.
He didn't.
But he could have.
He probably could have.
That's the point.
Probably would have been easier than the coyote.
All right, Joe, reach out to Ian. We're going to have him on. He'll probably say a lot of, like, very ominous things. Like, man,
I've
sometimes,
had some experience in this field.
sometimes,
No, I'm a sanitation worker.
I paint houses.
yeah, there it is.
I like to paint houses.
People call me the cleaner.
Sometimes I got a lot of concrete blocks and rope in my garage.
I have to point out a slight irony in this conversation thread. Just I think it's worthy of attention that we absolutely 100% crucified two people for beating up on one particular animal, and now we just lionized another guy for, in a very similar way, brutalizing an animal. I recognize there's context.
Yeah.
But I just
Important
have to
context.
point out a little bit of irony to the way that that's gone.
Hey, this is one of those things, like one of those, less the listener can decide.
Absolutely.
Are we being hypocritical? Possible.
Possible.
You decide. It's kind of like one of those choose your own adventure things.
Yep.
We'll record two different endings. You tell us which one, which one you want us to put in. But you're not wrong. Violence against animal. The context being the important part.
Context matters. I am not arguing against context. I just felt like that had to be addressed. Like
Yes,
we
for
had to
sure.
call
I like
out
it.
the fact that
That's
there's
true. I know it's worth bringing up, but I would like to think that if Mr. O'Reilly had the option to kill this coyote in an ethical, quick way, he probably would have done so.
I would like to think
rather
so as
than
well.
strangling him in the snow for 10 minutes.
He even said he didn't want to kill it. Like he
Yeah.
felt remorse.
He said it in a very Bond villain-esque way. But he said it.
I'm sorry you made me kill you.
He was like,
You did this to yourself.
he clearly wanted to live, but so did I.
It's incredible shit.
It's like, what?
I couldn't.
When I
script
watched that, and he's wearing all black, he's
Yeah.
wearing like a black trench coat. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow, like the bags under his eyes are just like, he's been thinking about some shit all night long.
Yes.
He's a little bit tired. All right, man, I had so many things I want to talk about. Oh, we said last week, Phil, and I don't want to leave people hanging, that we would talk about lab-grown meats, but I feel like we could have like a 3-hour opening segment at this point.
We talked about this. Like as you were working on that piece, we had some good conversation.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Your call. It's your podcast, man. You get to make that choice.
That's true.
You're the boss.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to do lab-grown meats. We're going to get to James Swan, PhD, in a minute. James Swan is awesome. Thespian. First thespian we've had on the show, Phil? We haven't had any thespians on. He's one. He had told a story about Walter Matthau, which I thought was great. A renowned ice angling actor.
Absolutely.
So that fits into what we're up to right now. He talks about he dressed up one time as Recycle Man and went around. He sent me pictures. It's hilarious. I'll try to post them. But James Swan has done everything. So you're going to enjoy that conversation. Before we get to that, we got to talk about lab-grown meats. I wrote a piece for themeateater.com. Why, you might ask? I was into this subject for the moment.
It is the meat eater.
And it also is that.
So it seems pretty on the nose.
Yeah, with words and the association of words. So we're there. It's called Lab-Grown Meat is Here to Stay, and it might change everything. Yes, I believe it is. So go read that piece, but in that piece we talk about a lot of things. The major thing is this thing's coming. I would say it's just about to the point where you're going to see it in stores. There's a lot of things happening in a positive way for what they're now calling cultured meat industry. There was a big debate about what to call this, what you could call it, how you could sell it, how you could name it. But there's momentum in the technology, in the production, in the funding. There's a lot of new funding. You got guys like Bill Gates involved in this, Richard Branson involved in this. Some of the major players in Silicon Valley are involved in this. They feel like it's the future.
Oh yeah, on that note, my best friend from high school, who's way smarter than me and has graduate degrees from Yale and this kind of thing, it's his job to kind of like nurture startup companies and how they should invest their money and grow. And the thing he is most excited about is this.
And so they just back in August, 5 companies started the Alliance for Meat, Poultry, and Seafood Innovation. They're lobbying now for this stuff. They said they're a coalition of food companies dedicated to producing meat, poultry, seafood directly from animal cells. And I guess before we go too much further, we should say, what the hell? What the hell is lab-grown meat? Miles made a good point. Tell him, Miles, about the
I feel like I make
the misunderstanding
good
about
points all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I feel like
you got to narrow it down a little
which
bit.
one, Ben?
Pick one, O'Brien. You're talking to a genius here.
Which of my moments of brilliance do you want me to elaborate on?
I like that.
So I think what you're referring to is I have had a few conversations around this topic with folks who seem to conflate the lab-grown meat idea with what we're seeing in a lot of different places right now with the plant-based meats, the Beyond Burger, the Impossible Burger, and the sausage varieties, right?
Yes.
Those have just recently kind of hit the mainstream market in a way that they never had before. Plant-based meat, which I think is a misnomer, but whatever.
We've covered that.
Yeah, we had that discussion on the vegan butcher shop.
Then I just go like, what?
But
I still want to know what jackfruit is.
It's a semantic argument. I'm not going to get there.
Jackfruit. Everything's made of jackfruit.
But I do want to very clearly line out that there's a difference between these fake meat or plant-based meat products and the cultured meat. Those are two totally different technologies. They're two totally different products. They are not the same thing. The cultured meat is grown from lab or from animal cells in a lab, so it has never been attached to an animal that has a nervous system and all the other things that we associate with an organism. It's just cells reproducing in a closed environment that are animal muscle cells.
Yeah, they put in a little petri dish. They do a little biopsy.
Right.
On whatever animal we're speaking of here. Obviously, they intend to do this for fish as well. That's what they say.
But this is not, when you see the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger, this is not the same thing.
This is totally different.
Don't get those two things confused.
And I think the key difference in the eyes of the folks that are manufacturing this stuff is that the Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger, while they would eliminate animal agriculture if adopted on a mass scale, there still is environmental impacts of the plant-based ingredients that go into these products. So the difference here is other than removing the cell from the animal and having the manufacturing facilities and all those things, there's, to me, a really logical thread that says that this could eliminate a lot of the issues with animal agriculture and plant-based agriculture as well, monocultures and things like that. So this is... there's a logical thread that you can trace this to, like, hey, here's a nice solution for those things. And that's what these companies are largely ideological. They're not out there to, same with these Impossible Beyond Burgers, things like that. They're not out there to make you healthy. They want to make sure that happens. I would imagine the FDA will not approve them unless they do, but that's a big part of it. So that's what it is, right? I said in the article that the first taste test was back in 2013 in London. It aired on BBC. You watch it. There's links to it. There's in the article. You can watch it. It's weird. There's food critics like chewing on this stuff and then talking about like how it tastes. It feels very sci-fi to me. It feels just weird. And most of the people that the comments I read are just like, no, we're not doing this. Like I'm not. I don't even want to read about it. I don't.
But we are doing it.
That was my point. Like we're doing it.
We're doing it.
It's happening. And as Phil said, and as I wrote in the article, a lot of very smart people, a lot of progressive people that kind of sit and worship at the altar of technology and progress this is the future. That's what they say.
I mean, it's a future. And I think that I don't necessarily share your same level of skepticism about this. Now, that's not to say that I'm fully on board and I think this is a panacea. It's going to solve all our problems. I don't. But I also am very much of the opinion that our current animal agriculture practices are not real sustainable. And as we continue to grow in population and as more and more of that population wants to consume animal protein, we were going to have to come up with some solutions for how we're going to pull that off. And I don't think that clearing forest land to raise more industrial cattle is the answer. I'm not a fan of that. I know that's what's going on. I don't personally consume very much industrial meat. That's just, I'm lucky, right? I can hunt and I have friends who hunt and I fish, and I'm in a very privileged position in that I get to harvest the vast majority of the meat that I eat and my family eats. But not everybody can do that. And so I think it's easy for us as hunters right now to sit and say, oh, well, big agricultural meat's bad, but I don't support that. We can't scale hunting to the point where it's going to solve all the problems that we have. This, I don't know. There's a lot more information that needs to come out about this practice. There are certainly going to be byproducts and issues that come around as this technology continues to develop. But I'm also not immediately throwing it out as like, it's got to be bad. This is not going to work. It's fake meat. I don't know. The jury's still out for me. I'm curious to see the direction that it goes.
And I think that the point of what I wrote in that article was to address that. Like, it could be a solution.
Maybe.
It's one of many possible solutions to what, man, you would be incredibly short-sighted not to see the issue here. We'll have, 10 billion people by 2050 is the estimation?
Yeah.
Can't feed them the way we're feeding them now. And if you start to, and that's why people also ask me, why are you so concerned, or you're doing a hunting podcast, why are you talking about veganism and plant-based meats, and why are you getting into lab-based meats, and what is this? Like, why? And this is why. Because it's convenient for me to say, I'm going to kill an elk, and that's all I'm going to eat. It's convenient. It's nice for me, but as you said, Miles, and as I wrote in the piece, it's not scalable.
Nope.
It's not going to fix everything. And we can't go out into the public and say, this can fix your problem. It's not.
No.
On a very personal level, it can be an anecdote to all these issues with animal agriculture and the production of foods. So can a garden in your backyard. All these things can be solutions to those problems, but they're very personal solutions and not necessarily scalable in the way that we've set this stuff up. Just not.
Or in the way that we need them to be scalable if we actually want to come up with long-term solutions for the challenges that we're going to face.
And so
and that we are facing.
Here's the point that the one point I'll make, and I'll just try to make it brief, but we talk about this forever. The point that I make in the piece and the point that I'll make now is that I think that we can hunt better, farm better, we can grow better, we can do all the things that we're currently doing better, right? And still associate with the natural world, not totally disconnect. If I eat the perfect cellular piece of meat, my feeling is it's kind of giving up. It's giving up on saying, like, there's enough of us within this 10 billion people that will never step back and look at their consumption. We have totally, over the last, 10,000 years since we started to cultivate the earth, to grow things. Over those last 10,000 years, we have evolved so much. There's enough of us now that are unwilling to look back at how they consume and do it better, that we have to come up with this idea. Like, I said in the piece, it's Orwellian in some ways. Like, to grow this is giving up in my mind. So my argument is, like, look, this is, again, like, it's strangely robotic as a solution. Like, it just strangely, like, we couldn't reason with people anymore, so we had to just say, screw it, we'll grow it in the lab. Like, there's no way that all 10 billion of these people are going to sit down and say, we are screwing this up, and then all come together and fix it. That's not going to happen. There's no way. So we'll reverse engineer what we've already created and just do it all in the lab. That's my feeling. And my cynical ass feels like we've already passed that tipping point. Right. That's the point you made to me as I was writing it. Like, dude, we're already there. We've already created a completely synthetic food culture for just about everything we consume. Yeah. And so I to me, this is just one more step in that evolution. And that tipping point where we lost all the connection to giving up on coming together with a consensus of how we do this sustainably, that ship has sailed, man. We are way past that happening.
I agree with you, Miles.
That's so fucking
I'm very cynical too. Like, I'm
so
right there, right
That's
there
such
with
a
you.
depressing idea. And to watch this go down, this is coming. I mean, it's how, like, the question is, how big is it going to be? Yeah. The question isn't. And how effective is it going to be? Yeah. And so, look, I would probably eat one of these things happily, knowing I said this about plant-based meat in the past and veganism in the past. Like, I would prefer to act in that way outside of my wild game meat that I consume. Mm-hmm. I would prefer to act in that way as a philosophical, ideological, like, way of being. Yeah, I don't want to consume things if I don't know where they come from. But as you guys both said, if I'm being cynical, I'm like, well, where did my clothes come from? The store. Like, where did my car come from? The lot where I bought it from. And so it would be hypocritical for me to say, like, oh, I have a garden and I kill animals, so I'm cool. I've done it. Don't worry about me, guys. Worry about the other 10 billion folks that aren't as that aren't smart as me.
Shearing my own sheep.
Yeah.
And producing my own wool.
Point taken.
I mean, I think if you really want to look at what we've had to do to support the population that we currently have, it is all lab-based, right? There is no feasible way that we even come close to where we are now, or even the population that we had post-World War I, unless we figured out a way to synthetically create fertilizer. For sure. We had to find a way to separate nitrogen out as a molecule, which we didn't have before, because guess what? We were running out of guano because we'd harvested it all over the world, and we didn't have enough fertilizer. We didn't have enough nutrients in the soil to feed our population back in, like, 1930. So my point in all this is I think you have to look at it in context. Every time a new technology pops up, it's very easy to look and be like, the sky's falling, we're all screwed, that's going to kill us. And maybe it will. But there have been a lot of times.
You said that was like very professorial.
Yeah.
Maybe it will.
But there have been a lot of times in human history where this has happened, and then we, like, get past it and it works out and everybody goes, oh yeah, that was a great idea. So glad we did that.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. I just think this is different. I think this is a leap. It's quite the leap.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today. Because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Maybe if we said, hey, man, we've industrialized all this other stuff. Let's keep how we interact with the natural world and how we consume it, at least from a dietary standpoint, let's keep that separate.
But again, we don't.
I know.
We don't.
I know.
And we can't really if you want to run the numbers.
That's what these folks have done. And they have a prophecy and it says that this is the way. And I'm not totally against it. I'm just worried about how quickly we might jump into it. And like how quickly we'll embrace that technology and how quickly it will change us at our core. How quickly it will change our humanity, like how we think about the world, how we move around it. And so that's a worry that I have. You read the piece, you'll read kind of, it's addressed briefly there, but I says in the title, it's here and it's probably going to change a lot. And we'll have to deal with that. I just would like there to be a firm warning that like while we're dealing with this, let's be mindful of what it can do to us and what it probably will do to us over time. Because it's important to know we already talked about tragic wisdom and all the things like life and death, and when we remove that from this process, boy, it's worrisome to me.
If you want me to prognosticate the thing that I'm actually most worried about in the success of this, which is not something we've covered, but I want to know what happens when we lose grazing leases as something that we want for federal and state lands. Right. If we supplant, this is a long way down the road and a lot of hypotheticals, and I get it, but if we really do supplant the beef industry to the point where it declines, all of a sudden there's a whole lot of public land that's no longer being monetized in the way that it once was, and far fewer defenders of those lands. And I like those places. I don't love seeing cattle on them all the time, but that's just to throw another thing for you to worry about with all this into the mix.
I'm stressed out now. My poor children. One thing I mentioned in here, and there was a group called Rethink X. They're an independent think tank out of London, which a lot of this stuff seems to be coming from London, but San Francisco was picked up on lab-based meats, cultured meats as well. But they theorize that by 2030, demand for cow products will have fallen by 70%. That includes chicken, pig, fish, and other things.
By 2030?
By 2030.
I don't buy that.
I don't buy it either.
That timeline's too short.
Yeah, way too short.
I went and did a bunch of research as to how close some of these things are. There is a company called Just Meats out of San Francisco that thinks that they might be able to get a chicken nugget. Why the first lab-based thing has to be a fucking chicken nugget, I don't know. Why couldn't it be like something
Yes, you do.
not processed? I guess I know.
Yes, you do.
That's why. I can't. But they also said this is maybe where it gets the scariest for me, or just the most sci-fi, that they said that there will be molecular chefs that are creating food much like current folks create an app, software-based chefs. So they'll be able to look at certain molecules, put them all together, and create something in a lab that can taste however we desire it to taste. That makes me nervous.
That's freaky. That's really
It's freaky, man. That's a good way to put it. It's freaky. That's why it's interesting. And so we'll continue to cover stuff like this on the show. And in fact, next week we're going to, next week I'll tell you what we're going to do. That's not going to be a surprise. Next week we're going to do a Pepsi challenge on plant-based meats and wild game. We're going to put a blindfold on some people, and we're going to ask them to taste each one and see if they can pick out the wild game.
I don't think I'm invited, but I'm just going to crash that one.
Please come.
I'm just going to hang out and eat.
The rumor is Stephen Rennell is going to be here for that. We got a bunch of people from the office that want to take part. A lot to cover there. James Swan is a pretty interesting man. He has written books. He has written treatments for TV. He's been on TV. He's been in movies. He's written documentaries. He's co-produced documentaries. He co-wrote a book with John Norris called War in the Woods about fighting. You all probably know him if you listen to the Meat Eater podcast or if you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. He was in on the first publishing of that. Did a lot of ride-alongs with John during that time. And so as I dug into this guy, I realized he's done a lot of stuff. And I think at one point during the podcast, he talked for like 20 minutes straight. And then my only response was, can we be friends? That was it. Because he's got a lot of stories. So I imagine sitting around having a whiskey with James Swan would be quite interesting. So hopefully over the next hour or so, you feel that way. So now you're going to listen to James A. Swan, Ph.D. on all things hunting, all things philosophy. He is also one-time Recycle Man, superhero. Enjoy. Dr. Swan, how are you?
Just fine, thank you, sir. And you?
I couldn't be any better. As I was just telling you before we hit record, I'm a newly minted father, so I'm feeling pretty good about life right now.
That sounds great.
I cannot complain, but I'm excited to talk to you. I've been doing a lot of research about your life and times and your work, and you have your work is varied. I'll just say that. There's a lot I could say about it, but you were just telling me you acted in 21 films and different things. You've written books. You have directed and written documentaries. You have on and on you go. So there's a million things to talk about, and that's my favorite type of guest on the show. So thanks for doing all that. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
We should start out with, I was reading a couple of things, and I came across that you grew up in Michigan. Our founder, Stephen Rennell, grew up in Michigan, and a bunch of our crew here grew up in that part of the world. So we might as well start where you started and a little bit about how you first came to love the outdoors and being outside and wanting to do it for a living.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised on an island at the mouth of the Detroit River as it empties into Lake Erie. Grosse Ile is the name of it. And, 50 feet out the front door of the house, you could be in a canal and you could be fishing and, you go another 100 yards and you could have a duck blind. So from a, very early age, I learned about hunting and fishing. But I well remember that the first fish I ever caught from that canal was a big pumpkin seed sunfish, and we brought it back with great ceremony to have for dinner. And it took one bite out of this thing, and it just tasted horrible, tasted like oil. At which point my father kind of said, "Oh, well, the Naval Air Station and, some other things dump a lot of stuff into the water around here." So that was my initiation into one, loving nature and at the same time being acutely aware of pollution. And, I grew up there and hunted and fished a lot, but we really, the Detroit side, the American side of the river, was a public health hazard.
Yeah.
So, if we wanted to go fishing, we always bought Canadian licenses because the only thing that dumped really a lot of stuff into the river over there was a whiskey factory. So, but and then I also had bronchitis, and so when I went to school at the University of Michigan, other than playing some football, what I was really interested in is what in the world can be done to deal with the air and water pollution back in the Detroit area. And I started out as a wildlife management major, and then sophomore year, I was assigned to read Aldo Leopold, Sand County Almanac.
Influenced all of us, didn't it? That guy.
Yeah, Leopold basically says, that the environmental problems really are not political. Ultimately, they're in the mind of man. And suddenly, that just struck me, and I changed my major from wildlife management initially to conservation education. Then I got a master's degree in resource planning, where I went back to the river and interviewed about 50 different people there, trying to find out why, what did they think about pollution? And basically what I learned was people adapt. And so that ultimately moved me to create a PhD degree in environmental psychology. It was the first one that they had ever had at the University of Michigan. And, and I went back and studied the people living back there, trying to find out how it was that they developed their, their feelings about the pollution and conservation. And what came back was basically that the way that people really started to care, they could adapt to living around air and water problems, even though that it was causing a health hazard. But that the kids, especially in the group that I did research with at a high school, the ones that would cared most about conservation and pollution, had gotten out of the city, and they'd spent time where all the air and water were clean. And so, I got involved at that point in teaching a little bit about that. I class in environmental psychology, but I also taught the first class on environmental communications because I felt like that was important in this age. And then I was there for a couple of years and worked on the first teach-in, that we had in 1970, and that was, it was the biggest in the country. We had 50,000 people there, and I then got offered a job to move out to the West Coast, and I decided to take it. And it was suddenly like, I was put in a place in Washington where there wasn't any air and water pollution. And so, I was still interested in studying what got people excited about conservation. And what happened to me then was I was in Bellingham at Western Washington, and I met some of the Lummi Indians, and they took me fishing. And I started to get a feeling for them and how they connected to nature. And it was very different and very deep and powerful. And ultimately, I then took a job down at the University of Oregon, and where I was actually teaching psychology. And what I really started to get into more and more was just, what is this thing that Leopold talked about? How do you get into to mine the land? And, I ended up, after 3 years down in there, I ended up then running a holistic health center and being a counselor for athletes primarily. And in the process of running this center, I met Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. And Joe had been, an athlete in college also, and loved to hunt and fish. The biggest fish he'd ever caught was a huge muskellunge. He had pictures of it he showed me. And one evening at a French restaurant, we were sitting around eating and talking, and Joe sort of takes a sip of his French wine and says, I'm going to make a prediction. I think you're going to evolve into working in mainstream media. And, at the time I thought, what? I'd been a psychologist, a college professor. He said, no, you just apply that to the media. Just wait and see. Well, about 8 months later, my family and I moved to the San Francisco area, and that's where I really started to get into doing things that would apply for some of the stuff that I'd done, because I'd been studying how traditional cultures came to develop their feelings about conservation, both in Alaska and in the Lummies up in Washington, and then I spent some time in Japan as well. And so my wife and I started producing symposiums about traditional culture and the idea of special places of power and whatever. And that led me ultimately to write a book about sacred places, and that got me on television. I ended up working with sightings and ancient mysteries, and that was sort of my baptism. And then one day I started writing, and one day my wife comes up to me and says, "Look, there's this cattle call coming up for a movie from Francis Ford Coppola. You've been wanting to do something like that. Go." So, I went to this thing, and Jesus, there were 300 or 400 people there in the audience. Each one had to come up on stage and get your picture taken and that sort of stuff. Well, Francis connected with me and liked me. So I ended up getting a part in Tucker, the Man in His Dream, which interestingly enough was set in back in Detroit. And in the process of that, I was put in a scene with Martin Landau, who turned out to be one of the nicest people I have ever met.
Yeah, a legend.
Oh, and one day, I worked for over a week with Martin and got to know him. And one day we were sitting there, waiting for the next shoot to take place, and he starts smoking, and I noticed he'd been smoking a lot. He was really a chain smoker. And I finally said, "Look, Martin, you don't want to do that. You're going to kill yourself and ruin your voice for acting, for God's sakes. How would you like me to teach you how to stop smoking?" He said, "What?" I said, "Well, look, I used to work with athletes, and I taught them how to do relaxation and visualization. I'll teach you how to do that." Well, I did. He got it, and he stopped smoking. And at that point, Martin says, "Look, Swan, I'm running an acting school. How would you like a short course on how to act?" So here I am, when between shots, where Martin says, "Now look, think of this. This is how you remember. This is how you recall," all that kind of stuff. And and at the end of it, Martin went off and he got an Oscar for his part in Tucker, and I started to get work as an actor, and I broke into Screen Actors Guild in Angels in the Outfield, where, having been a football player, I got to break up fights.
I love that movie. You're in that movie?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm the third base coach of the Toronto Blue Jays.
That's fantastic.
And the first base judge was a former linebacker for the L.A. Rams. And so, whenever they get into a fight out there on the mound, we'd have to go out and tackle these guys and break up the fights. And so that's how I got into Screen Actors Guild. And, since then, I just kind of went along with the flow of it. And Joe's been right. Ultimately, I was 10 years with ESPN Outdoors, working on some of their shows outdoors. And then during which time I was also doing acting work. And during the recession, everything shut up back in the Bay Area. And so we ended up selling our house and moving to New Mexico, which is supposed to be Hollywood in the desert. And so that's where I am today. And, I'm working on writing and producing. And I produced, before I left, I produced Wild Justice on National Geographic, which is all about game wardens in California.
Yeah.
And, now I'm working on actually a feature film about the life of Aldo Leopold.
Really?
The Leopold Foundation asked me to do this. And actually, one of Aldo's children, Nina, got me up there to start this thing off. And so, I'm working on developing that right now.
Wow, that's interesting to me for many reasons. We've talked a lot about Aldo on this show and with all of our brands. He seems to be seminal in all of our lives. It's kind of strange crossroads through that guy. How would you tell his story? How do you intend to tell his story in that way?
Well, God. Okay.
just describe the whole work for me.
Well, the basic, and I've got an option on this, by the way, so on his life story and the support of the foundation. So I guess I can tell you a little bit about it.
We'll support you. Don't worry. We won't steal it.
All right, good. Well, and frankly, one of the reasons that I really liked and wanted to do this is because what we don't have enough of these days are conservation heroes.
Amen.
That appear in, I applaud Stephen taking meat eating, for God's sakes, into mainstream media. That's great. And we need more things like that because we live in the information age, and so where the average person sits around for 6 or 7 hours a day looking at electronic screens. And the thing that I just learned, and I just produced the Hollywood Celebrity Archery Shoot, which was a benefit for National Archery in the schools program. And in the process, I got into really studying archery and discovered that back in 1980, there were 4 million archers in the United States. You know how many there are today? 24 million archers. I don't know about bow hunters, but at least people who shoot archery. And there are two reasons primarily why this is happening. One are the recruitment programs like archery in the schools. There's 2 million kids that are enrolled in that right now. And the other, though, is that first of all, when Gina Davis almost made the Olympic team, there was a huge bump in women archers. And then along came Jennifer Lawrence. And,
yep. Yes, sir. As a thespian, you'll appreciate the Hunger Games, yes.
And the Archery Trade Association says, my God, the number of people joining archery, picking it up, especially women, just exploded.
Yeah.
And so that's, and look, the other thing that I can say as an example of all this is that, and we have programs out there to recruit people to hunt and fish and shoot, the R3 program and all that. But a river runs through it, put 100,000 more fly fishermen in the streams within a year.
Yeah.
And so it's like if we have feature films that have a good soul to them, that show outdoor sportsmen as heroes rather than villains and bad people will respond. Yeah. So, that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, people forget that so many ways to go with this, with my next question, but I think people do forget. I have a young toddler and we watch Beauty and the Beast. and there's a hunter,
Yeah.
the Disney archetype hunter, manly man character, and there is the bad guy. So there's a lot of things like that. Not to mention Bambi, but there's a lot of things that are Not to mention that. So that's kind of their archetype for the manly man. He's a egotist and a hunter.
I mean, we've had a couple of things recently that have come out where it has really been bad guys. You know, one was a movie called Walking Out, which was, you know, father and son go hunting up in Montana, and they go out, and the kid was reluctant to go out, but he went with his father, and then they were going to shoot a moose. They climbed up and found the moose was dead. It had been poached, so there's poachers. And then a grizzly bear is there on the moose and charges them. And the kid climbs up in a tree, and the father hands him his gun. Gun goes off, and the kid shoots his father.
Yeah.
And the walking out, you know, is like, well, you know, trying to get his father out before he died. You know, and then there was another one about hunting in father. It was a TV show, I think, or a TV film where father and son reluctantly go. Father is like somebody who's got a hunting show.
Oh yeah, the legacy of a white-tailed deer hunter.
That's it. You got it. That's right.
I actually thought some of that was pretty funny, but you're right. In the end, it was not a flattering photo.
The kid shoots the cameraman accidentally. So you've got two feature, you know, productions where the kid is shooting somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I mean, there was so much more that could have been done with that, you know, with both of those. But what do you think
what do you think that is? You think that's, you know, you've kind of been, you know, you hung out with Walter Matthau, for God's sakes. You're kind of in the SAG, the Hollywood community. What is that? Is it the political leanings? Is it just the culture of the place where these movies are coming from? Why does it always end up that way, or seemingly end up that way more than not?
There are more people who hunt and do sport shooting there than you might think. But there's a very strong element of animal rights in Hollywood.
When you look at, I know a lot of celebrities, I don't know a lot of celebrities, but I know a lot of actors who hunt and don't talk about it, can't talk about it. Their agents won't let them talk about it. They can't even post on social media wearing camouflage. And that's unfortunate because that shows that those through lines of hunting is not the right thing to do. It's not good for public relations. Therefore, it's taboo. Has sunken in that culture. It just has.
Yeah, it is. And you know, one of the things that is I've gotten into, I write for a couple of different publications and stuff, and so I've continued to try to look at the psychology, some of the psychological aspects of hunting. And in the process, I ran across a guy, Harold Herzog, who is at Hal Herzog at West Carolina University. He's a psychologist who's been studying vegetarianism. Do you know what percentage of Americans are vegetarian? According to Hal, 2%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you know, and even the vegetarian media admits 3.5%. And as for vegans who get all kinds of publicity, 0.5%. That's it.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, what those folks have done is they really knew how to get to mainstream media and use it.
Oh, well, I was watching, my wife forced me to watch the Screen. Both the Screen Actors Guild Awards she got on this thing and the Golden Globes. And I watched them for the first time ever. I'd never even been interested in. And they announced during the Golden Globes that the Screen Actors Guild and the Hollywood Foreign Press had both gone vegan, meaning these are both dinner parties, and at these televised dinner parties with all the most famous stars in Hollywood, they're serving vegan meals and celebrating it. And so that's how deep it goes.
The thing that Herzog came up with also that's even more incredible is that he says 86% of vegetarians return to eating some meat, and 70% of vegans do also. And the reason? for their health.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's a story that just isn't getting told.
Yeah,
and
I've read a lot about the reasons that people get into these. They're making a dietary choice for ideological reasons, and I've read several studies that say up to 65% of the people that go vegan or vegetarian are doing it for the ideology to save the planet, rather than for dietary reasons. So there's no wonder that there's that number or more that are turning back to meat because of B12 deficiencies or lack of heme iron or different things that they need in their diet. I mean, it's it's obvious once you look at it that way.
And so it's. I think we just need to be able to find ways to creatively talk about those things and put them out there, so that people will understand what in the world is going on. And, it's like in reviewing some psychologists who really have put a lot of work into this. And, I haven't been an academic full time for, 35 years or so. But that, there's stuff that has been done that points out hunting there's nothing wrong with it. And that all these concerns about labeling hunters as being evil, bad, all those other things are really, they're not substantiated. And there's a couple of quotes that I found that I thought I'd share with you. Sure. One of which is, are you familiar with the book, The Paleolithic Prescription?
I am.
And the paleo diet. Well, Melvin Conner, who's one of the three people who wrote that, is a psychiatrist as well as he has a PhD also in anthropology. And he got his PhD in anthropology by living in Africa with a Bushman, and so he had to hunt. And he comes back and they've got a quote there. Our hunting instinct has gone awry in civilized society, where the thrill of the chase and the kill are no longer part of that experience, and there are no clear avenues of expression, except, perhaps to our peril, in the streets and subways of today's urban jungles. And it's like, okay. But if you look around, I did a search a few years ago when I was writing my book In Defense of Hunting, and I tried to interview either psychologists or look at what people had said, and and ran into stuff. I mean, Eric Fromm, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, says, in the act of hunting, a man becomes, however briefly, part of nature again. He returns to the natural state, becomes one with the animal, is freed from the burden of his existential split to be part of nature, and to transcend it by virtue of his consciousness. In stalking the animal, he and the animal become equals, even though the man eventually shows his superiority by the use of weapons. And, and other stuff like on weapons, again, Melvin Conner writes, there is little or no evidence, physiological or behavioral, to suggest that predatory aggression, hunting, has much in common with interspecies aggression. Okay? So, it's like what we're dealing with is and the American Psychological Association, when I used to belong to it, they told me that they do not have any research articles reporting ethical hunters as wrong or evil.
Yeah.
So, it's basically what we've created is a kind of discriminatory consciousness that is that really doesn't give a full picture of mankind. And James Hillman, who was one of Jung's students, I knew him, and actually I taught some classes at his Pacifica College, which is a PhD program for grad students in psychology. And he said that he had found a number of his clients having dreams about angry animals chasing them. And some said that they thought it was because we should stop killing animals for food and support. However, what Hillman said is, no, when we dug into it even further, we found out the reason was that the dreams of angry animals chasing people was that the animals symbolized instincts of the soul, and they were being denied. And so that's what that was all about.
Yeah, there's no argument out there. Well, there's no argument within any intellectual community that I've ever read that doesn't back up the statement that veganism, and to some extent vegetarianism, but more veganism, especially as more of a religious practice as it is now, is so new to our humanity that we can't really judge its impact. It has no real history in our society.
Yeah.
Not long enough, not nearly as long as hunting or any other gathering would be noted.
Well, one of the things that I've looked at, I wrote a book called The Sacred Art of Hunting, where I tried to look at religions all around the world and what do they relate to hunting. And I found there's only one religion, major religion, Jainism, that says you can't eat meat, okay? And that's it. Otherwise, every other religion allows people to eat some meat if they feel it's appropriate. The Dalai Lama, for example, eats meat, and he's willing to talk about it. Yeah. And a few years ago, I helped produce a concert by the Coyote monks, the ones that do that kind of a groaning growl kind of singing and vocalization. Mm-hmm. And I about an hour and a half or 2 hours before they were to appear, I went backstage and says, well, what do you guys, and there's 22 dozen of them back there. I said, what do you guys want for dinner? And I was expecting to go to a vegetarian restaurant. They said, no, Big Macs. Big Macs. And they all
the Buddhists want Big Macs. I love it.
And so, and if you look at, like, in India, the reason that there are some Hindu sects, Brahmanism, which says you're not supposed to eat meat, but at least 65 or 70% of the Hindus eat some meat, and there's not much hunting over there because there's too many people, and it would cause extinctions. But the only way that they allow people to hunt is if they have animals like wild boars and stuff that are destroying crops. Oh, then you can do that, and by the way, you can eat. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about this stuff. And look, if someone wants to be a vegetarian, I don't have any problem with that. As long as you say, look, is this good for my health or not? And if it is, Mick Jagger's a vegetarian. He seems to be doing pretty well. So great, man.
Mick has abused his body in too many ways to count. But
yeah.
I would say that, I mean, there's a part of this conversation, and again, you've touched on a lot of your books, In Defense of Hunting being one that's interesting to me, but hunting as a sacred art being even more interesting to me, because when you start to think about, the philosophies around what hunting is, what it is in different cultures, what it is to us, the connection between hunting and religion, starts to trace you back through different cultures, through different times, through different ways to express what hunting means to a collective group. And that to me is what's interesting. And when it's been some years since I read your book, but when I read it, that's what struck me, is this connective tissue that, that's almost invisible to us unless we investigate it. From anywhere from, the Native American site of Grimes Point to you talk about the Yoruba religion in West Africa, all this stuff, Scandinavia and Norway, the different gods and the different prayers and things they said to hunting. So there's all this. If you start to trace it, there is a through line there that's worth discovering, and you did it well in that book and in some of your recent works. Can you tell people, you've already touched on this a little bit, but I want to return back to why for you is this so important? The connection between religion and hunting and these indigenous cultures to this continent and others. Can you really just put a fine point on that?
Well, what comes back to me, again, growing up on an island in Lake Erie, subject to air and water pollution, got me into basically asking the question, why is this happening? Why are we letting this happen? And when it's causing damage to people and their health, as well as, fish and wildlife. And what really, came through was I wanted to study what it was that made people conservationists like Aldo Leopold. And, and that's what kind of, that has been a theme through my work that's consistent, even though I've, done a variety of different things, that we tend to, and this is like, I was one of the people that helped write the first definition of what is environmental education. It was right before Earth Day. And I published the first article in a major magazine about this, and ended up consulting with the American National Association of School Administrators, I think it was, and, on having to write their policy. And what to me comes back now today is that our educational system is something that needs some help, especially when it gets into how do we develop people who have a real feeling for nature and conservation, and move them. And we do a lot of information, expression, but there's a guy at Harvard University, Howard Gardner, professor of psychology, who came up with studying what is intelligence, and he basically said IQ is only one thing. There are actually 7 or 8 different kinds of intelligences, one of which is naturalistic intelligence, and this is the ability to perceive nature and to see different kinds of animals and plants and fish and whatever, to organize them and to understand how they all relate to each other, and and like Teddy Roosevelt was kind of like an Einstein in this, as Aldo Leopold. We don't do enough education to give people the ability to develop that naturalistic intelligence. And it's really, what has been very clear is that, and here this goes back again, Abraham Maslow was one of the people that was a real pioneer in modern psychology. I met him and asked him, what did he think about conservation and, appreciation of the environment? He said, well, I've studied self-actualized people, ones who really are able to tap into who they really are and what they want to do in their life. And ones that I have interviewed, they all have a deep love for nature.
Yeah.
Okay? So look, man, how do you do that? Well, the research is very clear on this too. And I've done some of this, but there are a bunch of other people that have done this. You look for people who have had profound experiences in nature that really touched them. And that's what made them become conservationists.
Yeah, and when that connection is made, right, like whether it's at a young age or an older age, it was made in me at a young age through hunting. And that blooms into all kinds of different things. It blooms into who knows what, but it blooms and grows into, anthropology, as we've already talked about, and zoology and biology and all these fields of study that can just lead to that appreciation. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And you get to the point where, Aldo Leopold talked about the Abrahamic concept of land, right? Where we abuse the land because it's a commodity. It belongs to us. But if we see it as a community, if we all share in it, then we have this innate value. And as I'm tracking all the things we've already covered, especially when you're talking about your upbringing in philosophy and in your studies and your teachings, it just seems like there's if we can instill a deep value of the natural world in people, then it's endless after that. It's boundless after that.
And what it does basically is that it gets you back in touch with that unconscious in each one of us that we don't do enough to really explore. To me, there is a real need in our schools today to help people get in touch with who they really are. And, if I look back at myself, one of the things early on, which I liked to do, but I didn't develop for the longest time, was I like to be a performer. Okay. No, it just, it was something there, and I got it all kind of, involved in these other things. And then Joe Campbell was the one again that just said, hey, you're going to get back into mainstream media and entertainment stuff. And, I was a musician for a while. I had a comedy rock band for a while.
We got to be friends, man. You do a lot of interesting shit.
It was fun. What we did was, this was back in the Bay Area, it was 1990, and Earth Day was coming. And so I had this idea about how about having a contest for kids in this area to design a costume for a character who is promotes recycling. And so we got several hundred kids that submitted these things and worked it out so they'd get a free trip to Disneyland for their family. And the one that won was this one kid who drew a picture that looked like one of the Hopi Kachinas, but he was made out of garbage. And his name was Recycle Man. And so we had this award for everything. And somebody says, when we're finished, well, James, what are you going to do with Recycle Man? I don't know. He says, well, look, the person actually who was bringing this up was one of the people working for George Lucas in Industrial Light and Magic. He said, well, look, I think this guy, Recycle Man, could be a real character. We'll make the costume. And so Industrial Light and Magic made the costume, and nobody wanted to wear it. So I said, well, hell, I'll give it a try. And so I ended up writing a song, and I opened for Jesse Colin Young, literally at one of the Earth Day things.
Please tell me I could find this on YouTube somewhere.
And it's like what happened was people kept saying, well, Recycle Man, come here, Recycle Man with that. Well, I knew some musicians, James Gurley from Big Brother, and Maruga Booker, who was a drummer. His wife, who was a drummer also, and another guy who played bass. And so we created Recycle Man and the No Trash Band. And we played for about 3 years before the band broke up and, got on television and performed stuff and whatever. And it's just things like that people could do, that instead of, yes, we should know all the statistics about recycling and everything else, but hey, also find a way to get across the same message where it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're addressing what you're talking about there, and a lot of what you've already talked about is kind of this weird micro-macro issue. Like on one level, you could get in a classroom, as you did, and teach people about environmental psychology and how to appreciate nature. That's one thing you can do. You kind of plant the seed there. But then on a broad level, on a larger level, how do you address these increasingly complex topics and simplify them and make them fun, make them easy to listen to, make them, for lack of a better term, entertaining? And I think that's maybe the failure of hunting and conservation in the mainstream, because certainly the vegan ideology is pretty easy to boil down. Don't eat meat so things won't die. That's super easy. What's not easy is, hey, the natural world works like this, and this is how hunting and fishing and conservation push it forward. And I've grown to kind of believe that that's our greatest challenge, is taking that really complex thing and somehow making it compelling in a world that increasingly just wants to be anecdotal and be pandered to.
Yeah. Yeah. In the media, to me, it's sad what's happened with the media. Jesus, 10 to 17 times more negative and sensational news than objective.
Gross.
That's awful.
It's gross.
68% of the people do not trust the news.
Because there's no objective truth there. It's all, everybody's got an agenda or an ego or something they want to sell you. I mean, it's to the point where it's terrible. Yes.
Crises. It's like, God, there's a guy, Steven Pinker, who's at Harvard also, and he's got a TED Talks thing about this, about how to show what are the realities. He said, look, people will get news that reports sensational, horrible things happening as if the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. He said, in reality, like for crime, actually, since 1990, the amount of crime in the United States has been going down dramatically. And no one seems to celebrate that.
No, there's never been a safer, more productive time to live in this country. Never. And if you turn on Fox News or MSNBC, we're always right next to the next breaking controversy that you need to be angry about or scared about, because those are the emotions that lead to action, and action leads to money and views and ratings and all those things. It's a sick kind of cycle that we're in, and I'm not sure how we break it. Do you have any ideas how to break that?
One thing that to me, you brought up Fox. I mean, for better or for worse, Fox is the only news, at least online, that even has a section about the outdoors.
Yeah.
In their daily news. Now, some of it is crisis-oriented stuff, but there's some other stuff which is pretty good. But remember growing up how all the major newspapers used to have an outdoor page at least once a week, and stuff like that. And how many of them do you have now?
Well, and you said that you worked at ESPN Outdoors. When I first broke into the industry, I remember the day that they cut the outdoor programming from ESPN. I remember that day. I grew up watching that stuff, and I was very sad. I was sad. I'm like, it's the end of an era.
I know, and it set me up having to sell my house.
It's a little more personal for you than it was for me. But yeah, I mean, I remember coming up watching. That was a Sunday thing that we did at my house. Is we watched those programs, and for that to be over, and I remember reading and thinking at the time this was pretty shocking that it was going to be everything was going to be streaming and live programming, live sports was going to be huge because it was in the moment. And then these outdoor shows, they're not in the moment, so they weren't as valuable. And I just remember thinking how short-sighted that was, and is to this day, that there's nothing about the outdoors on those types of mainstream channels.
And it's just we're dealing with this stuff right now where the number of hunters has really been declining, and I've been talking with some folks back in California about all this, and Jesus. We need to find ways to help people get back in touch with the natural world and its power and presence. And there's a lot of good research that supports that. But it's like, our schools should be teaching that, to get kids out. It doesn't mean that they have to remember all the names of everything, but just to go out and have a good time. I mean, I remember one thing where this first introduced me to this is that back in Ann Arbor during grad school, I paid for my way through school by running the environmental education program in the Ann Arbor schools, where you took kids out on field trips. And I took this one group of kids out to a place out that was west of town. It was actually a hunting preserve. And we got out of the bus, and we were to look at different habitats and concepts, like ecological things. And I could hear off in the distance sandhill cranes calling. And I said, Jesus, kids, do you want to have a real experience? We're going to go stalking and see how close we can get to sandhill cranes. So I got them down, and I showed them how to walk quietly. We started going, and it was about a quarter of a mile away, down in a swamp. And we ended up crawling the last 100 yards or so to get up within about 50 yards of a dozen or so sandhill cranes that were down there. They were all calling. And finally the cranes took off, and the kids were just mesmerized by this. And what happened after that, and these were kids who lived in downtown Ann Arbor. this particular bunch, a lot of them had never really gone out to any place like this. And so I let them just roam around for a while. And finally, this girl comes up, and she's got a feather. I said, "Well, gee, this is a feather. Feel it." She'd never seen a large feather, let alone one from a sandhill crane. And she got that thing and took it back to the bus, carried it all the way back to Ann Arbor. And the last I saw of her, she was running off to go home to show her family the feather.
That's in us. That's in us. Natural curiosity is in us. It's bred into us, I feel.
You know, and if we can create things like that, I know of some research which has been done down in the LA area, where they took a school in the right in the middle of Los Angeles, and they put a garden in there, and suddenly school attendance got better and better, and it's like, and they were studying the garden. How does it grow? It's just simple things like that provide firsthand contact, that develop other access, points of our own soul. And that's, to me, what really is, what we need to be doing at this point. I mean, yeah, there might be climate change, and stuff like that, but there's a lot of data that questions some of that, and some of Pinker stuff is quite good at that. But, the reality simply here is that you can try to influence people by throwing crises and catastrophes at them all the time. And what it ends up with is it becomes one of the reasons why we've got some pretty high levels of anxiety disorder today, and, get people outside, for God's sakes, and to enjoy the world and experience it.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yeah, one of the major problems I've talked to a lot of people that have turned to activism, from vegans to environmentalists that have turned to activism, and I understand feeling the need to be a proponent for whatever solution you think is out there for whatever ills are in the world. I get that. I feel that myself a lot. But what has been concerning to me, and I don't know if you've seen this, is how quickly we go from hearing what the problem is, or someone positing, well, here's our the issue with our environment or our climate, our issue with animal agriculture, how quickly we turn to activism. Rather than turning to activism, we would turn back to the natural world, learn more about it, study it, fall into that more intellectual side of it, rather than turn to activism, which I think is more sensational and in a lot of ways easier. I've seen that a lot, and it concerns me because my personal feeling, I'd be interested in how you feel, is that exactly what you were just describing is the best way for me personally. If I was to go learn about ecosystems and the different ecosystem services of different wildlife and how the natural world works, I'd be better equipped to deal with any problems that I face on a small or large level. And I just don't see that as much as I'd like to. I see a lot of people turning to that activism. They go shout without really having done the work.
Yeah, I know. It's. I think part of it is the media itself, and people can get attention, and if they are upset about things on some level, that they find something that you can use to express your feelings about whether what they're talking about is what's upsetting them or not, is something to look at. It's like with the Hillman thing, of the animals chasing you, that could be a very scary dream. And it could, move you to want to go out and do things. But the reality is that what the animals are trying to do is to get you to get back in touch with who you are. And look, if people ask about how could you be, meat eater, God, well, you guys are meat eater. All you have to do is say, look, go look in a mirror. Where are your eyes? Are they on the front of your face or on the sides? Well, of course, they're on the front of your face. Okay, what animals have eyes on the front of their face? Omnivores and carnivores. Herbivores, where are their eyes? Well, they're on the sides so they can better look for something coming after them. So the reality is that you want to see if our nature involves the idea of being a carnivore. Okay, well, there it is, right in your face.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much of that. That's what part of this show. People ask me, why do you like to talk about this and that? We talk about anthropology a lot. I recently traveled to the Smithsonian to talk to a paleoanthropologist. It was a really interesting conversation to me. It might have been boring to some other people, but that was the crux of the conversation. Is when I think about my own humanity and kind of I trace this thing back, instead of trying to trace paleoanthropology to prove to people that hunting is the way to go or not the way to go, I'm doing it because I'm curious and I want to know those things so I'm better equipped to handle that question when it comes up. And I see that too. People are trying to reverse engineer their own ideas. They're trying to start with, well, the world is falling apart. Right. The world is falling apart, or the world is this way. Hunting is the best. Hunting is terrible. And people are trying to reverse engineer the world to see it with something they've already decided. And that to me has always just been, it just rings untrue. It just doesn't seem like the way that we should walk through the world.
No, I mean, it's just being close to nature. Again, comes to my own stuff that I got into thanks to the Lummies got me involved with it, actually, where, you begin to say, well, look, there are kind of subtle qualities about places and nature and whatever. How does it make you feel? Well, it makes you feel pretty good. Good. Then why don't you honor it? I mean, that's literally the kind of thing. And that's such more cultures around the world view places as special than not. And, aside from what Indians do in the United States, we don't do much of that sort of thing. But I tell you, in Japan, most of the national parks over there are tied in to Shintoism. And, and they have ceremonies to honor the animals, and you know, and stuff like that. Oh, there is a funny thing here though with the Japanese that I went over. I've been over there twice on different things, and some of my books are republished over there. But what has happened is that they've had very strong controls over firearms. There are only about 200,000 hunters in all of Japan, with 127 million people. So what is the consequence? Yes, there aren't many people shooting each other because there aren't that many guns. But do you know what's happening with deer and wild boar? They are destroying a lot of agriculture. So right now there's a big push going on in Japan to get people to be bow hunters. So they can go out and help control the deer and wild boar.
Yeah, and that goes all the way back to that. There's threads in that story to all the things we've talked about. A lot of them. There's the moral absolutism that some people like to put on the world, and that just means like an ethical view that says everything is right or wrong intrinsically. That moral absolutism, and that often comes to be true with in the secular context and within religion. People say, this is right or wrong based on my religion. And that's again, if you go out in the natural world, that's not true. That there's objectivism and there's consequentialism and there's other things out there that can help you learn. But it's hard in those situations where, even in Japan, where you're going to have to kill some of these things. You're going to have to if you want to get the balance that's required. So all those things tie together for me.
Yeah, they do, and that in the sacred art of hunting, what I've done, and that is that I looked at all the different major religions of the world, and to see what did they think about hunting, and it's very clear, that they have procedures. And when I was growing up back on the island, Grosse Ile, it was the common thing that the Episcopal Church every year on the eve of deer season would have a special dinner that blessings were given to the hunters, and that at the end of deer season, that hunters would bring in some of their venison and share it with people, and so Saint Hubert, for God's sake, is the patron saint of hunting. And he's honored more in Europe than he is here, but Christianity has some real strong things like this, and there are many different sects of Buddhism. They live with a notion that they are not supposed to kill things, but somebody else can do it, and they can eat them.
Yeah, you wrote about it was interesting. You wrote about the Muslim code of conduct for ethical hunting. I thought that was an interesting one. Take people through your knowledge of that.
Well, it's basically there are prayers, certain prayers that are to be said when one goes hunting and one is about to shoot something. There are definite sets of prayers that go with that fit into the Muslim tradition. And, when we bring that up in that part of the world, also the same for Jewish, that they don't eat cloven-hoofed animals, but otherwise, they're happy to eat other stuff that they hunt. I've got some good friends I've gone turkey hunting with. They're Jewish. So one of the things that I love in that book, and by the way, if there's a publisher out there, I want to do a second edition. So
please do.
Contact me, please.
It's a great book.
I want to do a second edition. But in every year around St. Hubert's Day, which is in the beginning of November, in this one St. Ignace, I believe is the town, they have a special ceremony to honor St. Hubert. And what it starts out with is hunters dressed in camo go into the church, and they form an archway, and some of them bring their dogs too, and they form an archway with their guns, over which then the priest and some members of the choir and the Mounties will march into to the church with them where they will celebrate St. Hubert. And they bring the hunting dogs in to be blessed as well. I mean, that's powerful stuff. And, you know, and it I think it ends up reinforcing people wanting to be ethical and honor wildlife as a source of very important food for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when you start to, then that goes back to the value conversation. You know, religion,
That's right.
Religion sets values and structure around values in a lot of ways, and that's, you know, one of its main advantages for people that believe that you have this structure, this set of beliefs that's instilled in you, and you have faith that those are true and those are good, and then you move through the world like that. And when I read that book originally, and when I think about religion and hunting, I think about that. I'm like, well, man. If my religion says hunting is sacred, animals are sacred, hunting dogs in this case are sacred, I'm going to treat them with a lot more respect and reverence, and I'm going to pass those traditions down in a way that will last.
My father taught me actually a prayer that basically when you're out hunting and you see something that you might shoot at, you know, you essentially have to say to yourself, God, please, you know, if this is all legal and everything like that, please let me, if I shoot at this animal, let me kill it quick and clean or miss it completely, you know?
Yep.
And that in itself just develops a sense of reverence for that. And I think that's one thing that should be important to me as in part of hunter education is to teach some of that. Let people be aware of that and feel comfortable with that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And teach them. Like, I know that, you know, you're never going to teach moral objectivism, say that word right, in these classes. But there is an idea that you can say is like the natural world, there isn't just right or wrong, especially when we talk about our own cohabitation and the way that we, you know, affect the natural world. That there's no one right or one wrong. Killing an animal in one case can be different. I mean, the fact of the matter it doesn't depend solely on a social custom or individual acceptance for sure.
Look at it this way too, you know, about, you know, there's this stuff that's been coming on about extinction, you know, and birds going extinct and things like that. Well, yeah, we did lose passenger pigeon, and that was several billion birds that disappeared. But look, right now we've got at least 30 million deer, white-tailed deer running around, and CWD is developing. I mean, the way you stop it or discourage it spreading is to harvest deer. We didn't until not that many years ago. There were no wild boar running around. Well, good God, they were brought over here and released in Texas. And now there's somewhere between 6 and 9 million of them running around. They do horrible damage to agricultural crops. Do you have Eurasian collar doves up there?
Not that I've run into. I haven't been in Montana long enough, but I've seen them around Texas.
Boy, we got them here. They're all over the place. How about Asian carp, for God's sakes? They get into the Great Lake, they will destroy.
I used to live on the Illinois River. They're destroying that place. They're destroying it. Yeah, no, so that goes back to the whole animal rights idea that there's a right and wrong. Don't kill, no abject suffering, all those things. That just doesn't, it's not supported.
You get a thing like in California, there are nutria there, like beaver-sized.
Delicious.
You know, like literally beaver-sized muskrats. They are very prolific, and they are now found in 49 states. And, you know, if you want to make sure you're going to get your vegetables, you sure as hell don't want to have nutria hanging around there, especially rice. And so, you know, now what's happened in California is they've banned trapping and fur down in at least in LA. But the reality now is, how are you going to control the nutria? Well, it's going to cost $3 million.
You build them. What you do is you build a giant boat, and then you net them, and then throw them on the boat. That's what you do. You don't kill them because that's wrong.
Yeah, you know. So it's like it's just, well, what can you say? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't, that's just part of the food chain.
Yeah, and it's a good conversation. This whole thing marries up to the reason I do this show, and I think a lot of the reasons that you've said that you do what you do, and that's because these really complicated topics need to be explored, and they need to be explored in a way that more people can think about and talk about and understand. Because we're up against it with folks that don't believe what we believe, and they believe that, like I said, there is a right and a wrong when it comes to killing animals. And all these examples just say that's not true. It just isn't true. There's not one right or wrong with all of this, especially when it comes to us humans.
Yeah.
I want to let you go without covering a few things that you've done, because I think we may have touched on this. We've bounced around. I love it. But you worked with John Norris Jr., if I'm not mistaken, on War in the Woods, combating the marijuana cartels of America's public lands.
That's right.
That's become a little famous in the Meat Eater world because John was on the Meat Eater podcast and then also on Joe Rogan. But talk about that. Like, you're working with him, and you know what strikes me about that briefly is this, that if you want to teach someone about public lands that doesn't care about conservation, a nice way to get them interested in what public lands are is by writing a book like this and getting them into a war on drugs.
I'd been involved, Jesus, since, for years, sometimes in working with law enforcement in various capacities, going back to the 70s, for God's sakes, and, applying my psychologist to this stuff. And in 2007, two game wardens came up to my son and I and said, we'd like you to make a documentary about the shortage of game wardens in California. At that point, there were 192 for 38 million people. So, my son and I said, sure, okay, we'll do it. So we started, and for 2 years, we went riding along with game wardens all over the place. And, on my website, look up Snow Goose Productions, and you'll see a link to projects where you'll find endangered species. The documentary we did, which was an hour-long documentary, which led to Wild Justice. But in the process, John came up to me one day and said, "You've been at a lot of different, patrols. How would you like to go on one with me?" Okay. So we drive down and meet him down in just around Stanford, for God's sakes, and drive up there early in the morning, and suddenly there are about a dozen people from all different aspects of law enforcement, from National Guard down to local police to to DEA and stuff like that, and a couple of game wardens. And so we drive up into the hills into a regional park above Stanford. And it's only 5 to 10 miles, for Christ's sake. You can see Stanford Stadium from up there and the thing, but it's a nice regional park. Pull over, and suddenly, all these guys get out, and they're fully armed for combat. And helicopter comes in, National Guard. And okay, and so, well, what are you doing? Well, we're going after marijuana grows. Okay. So they had this line that hangs out from underneath, and two game wardens, Norris and another guy, climb into this thing, and it hangs down like 50 feet below the helicopter, and so they fly off. I said, what's, said, look, this is how we get in there quickly. And I said, aren't you targets? Yeah, I said, but we pray a lot. And so they dropped them down, about a mile away. And then the helicopter comes back and brings in 3 or 4 more loads of them. And they finally said, okay, it's clear. You and your son get in with your cameras. So we fly over in a helicopter, and we end up hovering over this place. And I said, Jesus, I don't see anything down there. Pilot says, just watch. He starts to get lower and lower. And suddenly, when the wash comes down, the manzanita trees separate, and underneath is this bright green carpet. And it's all over the place, and it's like he says, that is marijuana. And what there was a grow there. Well, so, we filmed the whole thing and then, so he takes, I don't know how many pounds, several hundred pounds of marijuana that's attached now to the rope. And we start to go back. He says, I want to just go across the road here. And he goes over there and he says, there's another one. So we go back, ultimately have lunch, and they go back into this second one. Okay, and so again, they fly John and the others in, by helicopter, and they say, okay, it's clear. You and your son drive over, park your car next to the road. And I said, well, okay. And Jesus, there's John. He says, well, look, it's only 100 yards in here to this one. And we start to walk in, and he says, oh, by the way, you have to walk in every step exactly that I take, because they put in tripwires, bungee pits, and other things where you could fall and break your neck or get shot. Okay, and let me take it if it comes. So we follow him in.
Are you regretting this experience yet, or are you like, I probably should have stayed back?
Only about it couldn't have been more than 55 or 60 yards in.
Oh boy.
And we start to come into this place, and there's chicken wire up, rat poison all over the place, marijuana plants about 3 or 4 feet high. And and they're all over. And there's a camp in there. And there's ammunition, from guns. These guys were all armed, but when the helicopters came, they fled, thank God. And so, I said, well, Jesus, John, I mean, these plants look pretty good, but how in the world do they water them? He said, watch this. So we went over and he found about 8 or 9 50-gallon barrels, metal barrels. And those barrels all had water in them. So where in the world did they get that? There's no stream here. Just watch. Follow walking in on this little trail. They had been sneaking into the houses of Silicon Valley millionaires at night and stealing their lawn water and bringing it back.
Unbelievable. Unreal.
And, and so it's like here we were looking at a place where all these guys were armed. And, so, Norris started to introduce me to this stuff, and just as scary as hell. I can remember going into one up in the Mendocino County area, and we were going in actually on a vehicle, one of those, not a Jeep, but that you would ride to go back in as an open vehicle. And all of a sudden it backfires. And when the thing came, I thought, shit, we're going to get shot. No. But we went in there to this grow, and there were 20,000 plants that in the one down in Palo Alto. And up here there were, I don't know how many thousand that there were, but there were 36 sleeping bags in this place. Now, how many of these guys, are out in the woods? They're all armed, and scares the hell out of you.
All on public land.
Yeah. When John and I, when John says, "Well, look, I've been keeping my stories," and so I edited them for him and wrote, an afterword for him and stuff like that. And the book came out, and it was #1 in crime on Amazon books for, 3 or 4 months. And it first was picked up by one of the producers and it's all about, raids on these grows. And one of the producers of Friday Night Lights optioned the book first and wanted to make a feature film and got it as far as Warner Brothers. And then Warner said, no, we don't want a feature film. We want a TV series. And he didn't want to do it. So then he dropped the option, and then Novo Media Group picked it up. And they have hired the writers of the movie film, Logan, and they've written a Bible and a pilot script. And so with luck, they'll start shooting this
Wow.
year.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. Like I said, I mean, there's so many threads to that story. So if you haven't read that book or listened to the podcast with John, go and do that, because it's the book, I think, is probably the best accounting of it. Well, of all the things that you've done here, I mean, I was going to try to list off before we end all the things you can check out from James. You got War in the Woods with John Norris. You have the In Defense of Hunting, the Sacred Art of Hunting. You have that documentary out of Mongolia. Man, there's a million things you've worked on. I could only hope to have a career that has a singular event is as big as any of these things I just listed. So, man, it was a real pleasure to talk to you and learn about your life and times. And I imagine we could probably talk for another hour and a half and we wouldn't have any trouble with topics to come up with.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to just congratulate you guys, you and Stephen, the Meat Eater is taking it right out there to mainstream media, and God bless you.
Thanks. We're getting up and doing it every day, man. We're committed to just having good conversations, just like this one. That who the hell knows where they're going to go, but there's so much out there to learn and so much out there for us to kind of discover with everybody listening, especially in the form of podcasts. Yeah. That's why I love it. So thanks for having you on, and I guarantee we're going to be calling you and bothering you to come back on sometime real soon.
Okay. Good enough.
Thanks, James.
Thanks.
That's it. That's all. Episode 98 in the books. We are slowly and surely coming up on episode 100. Me and Phil we've been planning hard for it. We've been in the lab.
Got some secrets in store for you, too.
Really?
No.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
This was a great show. Thanks to Dr. Swan for coming on. Thanks to Miles Nolte, as always, probably our most well-spoken and articulate member of the Meat Eater crew. Big fan of Miles and all that he does. So anything Meat Eater fishing is the brainchild of that man. And we got our community manager, Joe Fernato, doing a lot of research for us, checking in on some of these interesting topics. So thanks to all three of those folks for coming on board. I know this show kind of went in a bunch of different places, some intended, some not, but that's the nature of podcast. So enjoy it. Make sure you go to firstlight.com, firstlight.com, go to firstlight.com, and then go down, look for Win a Tar Hunt, click on it, and enter. There's a picture of a guy that's not me on there.
That's fine.
Phil pointed out.
I think he looks better than you. He looks like a better version of you.
That's true.
Something you should aspire to.
I'd like to look that good. Mm-hmm. We'll find out who that is, and we'll call him. Have him on the show. So, firstlight.com, you can win a hunt with me in New Zealand. I think that's pretty cool. So you should do it. Now, before we go, we'll tell you about what you're going to see in the next show. You're not going to see it. You're going to hear it. So we'll probably film some of it, so you may see it. But what we're going to do, we're going to do a little Pepsi challenge. We're going to sit down with the likes of Mr. Steven Ranella, a bunch of people from the office, Kylie Archer. We're going to get Corinne, our producer, in here. Phil, of course, is going to take part. We just roped in one of our fabulous Wild Foods contributors, Rick Matney. He's going to come in and cook for us. Phil and I are going to go to some frou-frou grocery store, and we're going to buy some plant-based meats. We're going to match those up with similar flavor-profiled wild meats, and we're going to blindfold people, and we're going to do a little taste test. Taste and feel. Let them feel it as well, and they're going to have to pick out what's wild game and what ain't. And we'll see if they can do it. And if they can't do it, it'll be hilarious. And if they can do it, you may never hear it. So just trash it. So we're going to give it a shot. And that's next week on the Hunting Collective. We're also joined next week by Rachel Carey from the UK. We get a lot of emails from you listeners out there in the United Kingdom. A lot of them. It seems like there's relatively few of you that are listening to here, but you're all very vocal about the situation you're in. So I figured, while we have read some of your emails in past episodes, I wanted to kind of travel over there, take the temperature, what's happening over in the UK with hunting, the meat eating culture, veganism, all the things we talk about on this show seems to be pretty intense over there. So we're going to get Rachel Carey, who is a hunter, an Instagram personality, and has written a book about wild game. And so we're going to have her on. We're going to do that. We're going to do a little Pepsi challenge. We'll come up with a good name for it soon, Phil. And,
we'll workshop the Meat Mega Show. I don't think that'll stick.
You don't think so? All right, bye.
The Hunting Collective with Ben O'Brien is a part of the Meat Eater Podcast Network. It is produced by Corinne Schneider and engineered by Phil Taylor. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, themeateater.com, or anywhere podcasts are downloadable. Wherever you listen, leave a 5-star review and subscribe.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.